The 70s was a great decade for horror fans. This decade was experimental and formative for the genre, and quite a lot of films came out, some of which are still considered classic horror movies. Some of these are among the best-rated Hollywood movies across genres. From slashers, ghosts, spirits, and monsters, the 70s had everything to offer the fans. 50 years in, and still some of these movies are counted among the greatest horror films of all time. So, what made them special? What impact do they have even now? Let's find that out in our list of top 20 horror movies released in the 1970s. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. House, 1977. Japanese horror movies have been at the top of the game ever since the 70s. An example of this is House, which was released in 1977. This is a horror comedy film that is set in Tokyo. A beautiful girl named Gorgeous has made plans with her rich widowed father over the summer. When her father returns from his business trip to Italy, he brings along a surprise for his daughter, his new wife. Gorgeous is distraught and writes to her aunt wishing to stay with her. When the aunt replies, inviting Gorgeous to stay at her house, our girl brings along 6 of her friends. Everyone in the film has odd names based on their personalities. The friends are named Fantasy, Mac, Melody, Prof, Sweet, and Kung Fu. Yes, that is right, all based on their skills and characteristics. Upon reaching the aunt's place, the friends start encountering creepy supernatural incidents throughout that house. Ultimately, it turns out that every item in that house is haunted or possessed, and it is ready to kill the girls as they are trying to escape. The unimaginable events that happen and the plot twist that follows make this film worth a watch. Director Nobuhiko Obayashi got the idea for the film from his preteen daughter, who came up with something that is not boring and beyond the imagination of adults. Although the movie received negative reviews in Japan, it still went on to become a box office hit. It was released in the USA in 2009 and received mostly positive reviews, making it a cult classic. The Exorcist, 1973. Released in 1973, The Exorcist is one of the greatest horror films of all time, even now. It is based on a 1971 novel by William Peter Blatty, who was responsible for the screenplay of this adaptation. When actress Chris rents a luxurious house while shooting for a film, strange events start happening with her 12-year-old daughter, Regan. It starts with Regan feeling unwell and a sudden violent change in her behavior. Medical reports deem her physically fit, but something is not right with her. Meanwhile, a priest, Father Damien, is seeing a psychiatrist because he is having a crisis of faith. When the situation worsens and Regan kills the director friend of her mother, Chris reaches out to Father Damien. After examining Regan, the priest concludes that an exorcism is needed, for which a professional exorcist, Marin, is called. The graphic scenes of violence, along with the creepy and disturbing images that are shown in the film, made a lot of people watching it in the theaters faint, vomit, or have other physical reactions. This film is also considered cursed because a lot of incidents happened during the shoot, such as delays that cost 3 times the budget, deaths of some crew and cast members, and unusual accidents on the set. This R-rated film became the highest grossing of all time for a long duration and had a great influence on pop culture. This impact also earned The Exorcist an Oscar nomination, and several sequels were also produced in the years to come. Carrie, 1976. Stephen King is the king of writing horror books. Every horror fan has either read his books or watched a movie adapted from his novels. Carrie is one of his great works, and the 1976 movie of the same name was the first of its many on-screen adaptations. This movie is also the first ever Stephen King novel adaptation out of many hundreds of his published works that were later brought to life on screen. Carrie is a shy teenage girl who is often bullied by her schoolmates. The reason is that she is a loner and lives with her unstable and fanatically religious mother, Margaret. When Carrie gets her first period in school, she is scared, and to add to her fear, her bullies mock her and tell her that this is happening because she might have sinned. A teacher, Miss Collins, helps Carrie and punishes the bullies. Things change when Carrie discovers that she has the power of telekinesis. During the prom night, a big prank in front of the whole school turns out to be a nightmare for everyone. The rage, hallucinations, newly discovered power, and constant bullying over the years, along with some hidden truths that her mother reveals, comes out as a disaster and haunts the entire school. Carrie had and still has a significant impact on pop culture. The movie went on to inspire several other versions. In 2008, Empire ranked the movie in 86th position among the 500 greatest movies of all time. Alien, 1979. There are a few films that set the path for science fiction horror movies decades ago. Alien is one of them. Released in 1979, the film became such a huge hit that it turned into a franchise with 3 more sequels released in the next few years, a crossover with another big franchise, Predator, as Aliens vs. Predator, and now 2 upcoming prequels, one of them set to release in 2024. Nostromo, a commercial space tug with a 7-member crew, is set to return to Earth. The ship's computer wakes up the crew after detecting a transmission from a nearby moon. Even though one of the crew members protests against it, the ship lands on the moon. When one of the engineers detects where the transmission originated from, he discovers that it was from an alien ship. When they enter this alien signal, they lose Nostromo's signal. Meanwhile, the crew members stuck on the moon find some hundreds of eggs. When one of them hatches, it attaches itself to the face of one member, making him lose his consciousness. What would happen when an alien creature starts doing unimaginable things and you are unsure what else they are capable of? Yes, this is what happens later on in the movie, a series of creepy events. Alien's success created a media franchise where more books, video games, films, and toys related to the movie came out. The films also received an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects and went on to win other prestigious awards such as Saturn and Hugo. The Omen, 1976. There are several stories of a devil possessing kids in movies, but The Omen might have been the first one where the devil is living amongst us the entire time until everyone realizes. When an American couple, Robert and Kathy, give birth to a boy in Rome, the doctor informs the father that the baby died immediately. Without informing the mother, Robert decides to adopt another newborn baby boy whose mother had just died during childbirth. The boy is named Damien. Fast forward to 5 years, eerie incidents start happening, such as Damien's nanny hanging herself, a strange dog appears at their home, animals are terrified of the boy, and Damien does not enter the church. A priest, Father Brennan, suggests to Robert that his son might not be a human. Horrifying incidents do not stop and include more deaths and terrible accidents. We are pretty sure that the truth that eventually unfolds will terrify you a lot. The Omen turned into such a classic movie that it became one of the highest-grossing movies in 1976. It also received an Oscar and became a franchise with 3 other movies released later on. A remake was also made in 2006, where a prequel is also set to release in 2024. Jaws, 1975. After watching devils, ghosts, and spirits over the years in the horror genre, who knew the fans would be getting a new creature to be scared of? The sharks! Jaws is a classic cult film and was the highest-grossing film of all time until the release of Star Wars. Amity Island, a beach town, is haunted by a man-eating shark. The tourists and even the locals are fearing this new monster in their town that might affect their economy during the upcoming summer season. After putting a bounty hunt to the sharks, a local fisherman hunts a tiger shark. Therefore, the beaches are labeled safe. When 2 locals search underwater because they are not convinced that the right shark was caught, they find more human remains. Due to this, safety precautions are back again on the beach, but the 4th of July weekend with packed beaches makes things worse. The monstrous creature is back again, and horrifying events unfold in the waters. The first motion picture shot in the ocean, Jaws was followed by 3 other movies as sequels, making it one of the biggest franchises. Black Christmas, 1974. Urban legends are always the favorite tales of every horror fan, and when they turn into motion pictures, it's like having a dream or a nightmare come alive on screen. Black Christmas is one such movie that was inspired by an urban legend called the babysitter, and the man upstairs. However, the story was changed to include young adults in a university setting. A sorority receives an obscene phone call from a man quite often, and the girls residing there take him lightly. But one night, the man tells the girls who answer the call that he will kill them. One of the girls gets scared and decides to leave the place, but as soon as she starts packing her bags, she is murdered by a man hiding in her closet. Her disappearance starts a search party involving her father and boyfriend. However, more murders start happening at the sorority, and things take an ugly turn while determining the real identity of the killer. Black Christmas quickly became a cult classic slasher film upon its release in 1974, and was also considered an inspiration for the 1978 film Halloween. Halloween, 1978. One of the most iconic slasher films of all time is the 1978 released film Halloween. It is also considered one of the most influential and greatest horror films ever made. Michael Myers, a killer, was only 6 years old when he murdered his sister. 15 years later, as he is driving with his psychiatrist for a court hearing, Michael manages to attack the nurse and escapes. He goes back to his suburban hometown Haddonfield and starts killing unrelated people. But this one girl named Laurie notices his presence as he follows her throughout the day and is concerned. After several horrifying slasher incidents, Laurie is desperately trying to save herself from this mysterious man who is after her life. The eerie ambience and anxiety that the film gives throughout because of this merciless serial killer makes up for an amazing watch. Halloween also turned into a film franchise, spawning several sequels. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Another classic horror film that has fans to this date. To attract a wider audience, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was promoted as a film based on true events. However, the plot was mostly fictional, with just a few inspirations from the real serial killer, Ed Gein. Problems ensue when a group of 5 young people, including Sally and her brother Franklin, give a hitchhiker a lift in their van. As the hitchhiker starts demanding money, the group refuses, so he attacks Franklin and is finally thrown out of the van. After a while, the fuel runs out, forcing the group to explore an abandoned house owned by Sally's family. Meanwhile, 2 of their friends decide to go swimming on their own and come across another seemingly abandoned property. As one of them enters, a man wearing a mask made of skin attacks them, killing a friend named Kirk. This is just the start of the bloody, gory horror that is about to happen in the rest of the movie. You will start fearing for everyone's lives as they try to escape this masked murderer with his brutal chainsaw. The film has been credited as originating some of the major elements in the slasher genre. Like other great classics from this decade, the Chainsaw Massacre also started a series of sequels, prequels, video games, and a remake.
You, Sergeant, are the right kind of adult.
The Wicker Man, 1973. A British folk horror film that was released in 1973, The Wicker Man has been described as the Citizen Kane of horror films by Cinefantastique, a film magazine. A search for a young missing girl turns into a nightmare for Sergeant Neil Howie as he arrives on the remote island called Hebridean. Howie notices strange activities happening on the island where the inhabitants are praying to pagan Celtic gods. Everyone denies the existence of the missing girl Rowan. As Howie tries to untangle the mystery of her disappearance, weird things start unfolding. Eventually, he is trapped in a huge mess and there seems to be no exit for him. In 2004, The Wicker Man was ranked as the 6th greatest British film of all time. It also has several accolades to its name, one of them being a Saturn Award for the Best Horror Film. The 2012 London Olympics also paid tribute to the film by bringing out a Wicker Man to celebrate British cinema. Dawn of the Dead, 1978. The next on the list is another favorite subcategory from the horror genre, a zombie horror movie. Dawn of the Dead is about a zombie apocalypse in the United States. A mysterious illness takes over, and millions of people die and come alive again as human, flesh-eating zombies. The government takes precautions, but everything fails. Some people are trying to escape but are trapped. So our protagonists, Steven and Fran, devise a plan to steal a helicopter from their company and leave the place. Somehow they find themselves trapped inside a mall free of zombies. But are they actually alone, and for how long can they survive inside that building? What can you possibly do when you see your loved ones turned into zombies and try to kill you? All of these stressful situations are faced by the humans in this film who are desperately trying to save themselves. The film was a huge box office hit and is considered one of the greatest zombie films ever made. It is also included among the 500 greatest movies of all time in a list by Empire. Dawn of the Dead has an international cult following and has 4 sequels, along with a few remakes and several pop cultural references over the years. Susperia, 1977. An Italian horror film that is based on an essay? Yes, that's right. Susperia, released in 1977, is partially based on an essay titled Susperia de Profundis, published in 1845. A ballet dancer from America shifts to a dance academy in Germany, but is faced with a series of haunting experiences. As she is on her way to the school, the American girl Susie encounters a terrified girl fleeing the school. As she proceeds, the school denies her entry for the day. That night, the other girl who fled faces her worst nightmare. Meanwhile, Susie goes back to the academy the next morning, and she starts facing several strange incidents there. Susie talks to another student and gets herself involved in the eerie history of the school, which leads to more terrifying consequences. Susperia is the first film in a trilogy of films called The Three Mothers. The other films included Inferno and The Mother of Tears. It has several accolades to its name, including a Saturn Award nomination. The 2018 film of the same name is a remake of this great horror film.
Jonathan!
Nosferatu the Vampire, 1979. Vampires have a different fan base among horror fans and have a huge variety of movies and shows based on them. Next, we will be talking about one such movie from the 70s. Created in 2 different versions, English and German, Nosferatu the Vampire is a 1979 film that is a remake of Nosferatu, a German adaptation of Dracula. In 1850, an estate agent, Jonathan Harker, is informed that Count Dracula wishes to buy a property in Germany. So he sets out to do his job despite the villagers warning him against Dracula. Jonathan does not believe in vampires, hence he brushes off the warnings as mere superstitions. Upon meeting Dracula, he notices his strange appearance. Meanwhile, Dracula is attracted to Jonathan's wife Lucy upon seeing her portrait and is hoping to get a property close to theirs. Anyway, that is how the troubles start. First the nightmares, then the madness seeping into their minds, and a plague invasion. This story of survival, sacrifice, bravery, and horrors received a lot of praise from the critics and the audiences alike. This film also inspired an Italian version starring the same actor, but it wasn't a sequel. The Sentinel, 1977. What if you move to a new building and you don't know if whatever you are experiencing is real or not? Is the building haunted, or are you just hallucinating? The infamous shifting to a new house horror trope has always been a fan favorite. The Sentinel is one of them, but is not the typical film in this trope. You will be surprised by the plot twist that this movie will take you through. A young model, Allison Parker, is a survivor of several suicide attempts due to her traumatic childhood. Her neighbor is a blind priest, Father Halloran. Soon after she moves in, Allison starts facing physical problems, insomnia, and fainting. She also meets other odd neighbors and complains to her rental agreement, who in turn tells her that Allison and Father Halloran are the only occupants living in the building. Then who were the other neighbors she met? As the truth starts unfolding, terrifying secrets and mysteries unravel that take us and Allison to hell, literally. This movie stands out because the plot is not predictable and it has unique elements. The secret behind the building and Allison's true purpose are all connected in such a great way that makes The Sentinel one of the best horror movies. The Hills Have Eyes, 1977. A family goes on a trip for a vacation in Los Angeles. What can be scary about this? What can possibly go wrong? A lot of things. Getting murdered by some unknown creepy strangers might be one of them. When the Carter family of 7 members, along with their 2 dogs, leave their suburban town for Los Angeles, they do not know that a worse fate awaits them on the way. When they stop for gas at a place in Nevada, the owner, Fred, urges the family not to go towards the hills. but an unfortunate incident leads them toward the restricted area, and that's when the horror ensues. The family tries their best to keep themselves and each other safe, and not end up getting killed with nowhere else to go in the middle of nowhere. This film was a huge success and created a franchise, becoming a cult classic. Don't Look Now, 1973. Grief can make people do unimaginable things. When John and Laura lose their young daughter to drowning, Laura is not able to cope with the grief. But when John gets a restoration job for a church in Venice, the couple moves there. They met Heather and Wendy, twin sisters, at a restaurant who claim to see their deceased daughter. Hearing this, Laura's behavior changes positively. However, their daughter's spirit informs that John is in danger and should leave Venice. But is it the spirit telling the truth, or is it trying to deceive the parents for some sinister purpose? Don't Look Now creates an eerie ambiance with grief and spirits as strong elements, making it one of the best from the 70s. Over the years, this film has become a significant and influential film in British horror history. The Brood, 1979, a psychological body horror film. The Brood has such a unique concept that it gets so much more intense and scary as the film progresses. Nola and Frank are in a legal battle with each other to gain the custody of their 5-year-old daughter, Candace. Nola is mentally disturbed because of her traumatic childhood, and now the custody case. She visits a psychotherapist, Dr. Hal Raglan, who uses a unique technique that allows his patients to release their suppressed emotions through physiological changes in the body. Frank is skeptical of the doctor and keeps challenging his methods after Nola's sessions intensify. This is how the horror starts. A murdering child, traumatic past, mysterious illness, and Candace unknowingly going through the trauma that her mother once experienced is extremely horrifying to watch. Chicago Film Critics Association named The Brood as the 88th scariest film of all time. The Tenant, 1976. The Tenant will make you question reality, and you will probably start losing your mind like the protagonist, Trelkovsky. Not literally, though. It is the first movie in the Apartment trilogy. Released in 1976, this French movie is about a man named Trelkovsky who rents an apartment in Paris. The previous owner, Simone, attempted suicide, and no one knows why. He decides to meet her in the hospital, but she is all tied up in bandages, unable to talk. He meets Simone's friend instead and becomes friends with her. Over a few days, he has some interactions with his weird neighbors who put a lot of restrictions on him. One day, suddenly, he wakes up and dresses up in Simone's clothes. His behavior starts changing, and so does his routine, where everyone starts treating him like they did Simone when she was living in that apartment. This psychologically twisted tale with scary twists and turns will creep you out so much that reality will not seem real anymore in the movie. Zombie 2, 1979. Zombies have their own fans. Zombie 2 is given this title to give it the impression that it is a sequel to Dawn of the Dead, which is unrelated. This one is an Italian film that takes place on an island where research is being conducted on the emergence of the zombie phenomenon. Dr. David Menard and his wife Paula are on an island Matul where zombies have been emerging. While David is working on his research, Paula is keen to leave the island, but unfortunately, she cannot do so. A boat with 2 guides, Brian and Susan, also arrives at the island and is attacked by a zombie. Together, this group tries to find the cause and the cure for this illness amongst the increasing number of dead bodies and save their own lives in doing so. The film was a huge hit at the box office, and even though initially it received some criticism, it gained a cult following over the years. A Bay of Blood, 1971. One of the most violent films, A Bay of Blood emphasized graphic bloody murder scenes in the year 1971. As the name suggests, the movie is based on a house at the bay and the fight among its heirs. The movie starts with the husband of wheelchair-bound Countess Federica Donati attacking and strangling her to death. The husband, Filippo himself, is then stabbed to death by a mysterious killer right after killing his wife. It is revealed that Frank Ventura, a real estate agent, and his girlfriend planned the murder of Donati so that they could gain possession of the mansion. But their plan is ruined when Filippo is also murdered. Later, more murders take place on the property, and a bloody, gory, violent series of killings takes place to claim the mansion. It is scary to see what humans can do to gain materialistic objects for their own satisfaction. They can go to the extent of killing others. All of this earned A Bay of Blood a spot among the 50 greatest horror films of all time in the 2005 magazine Total Film. Marvelous Verdict, Now that we are at the end of our amazing list of the greatest horror films from the 1970s, we can only wonder how innovative and mind-blowing the plots of these movies were 50 years ago. Yes, it has been around 50 years since most of these movies were released, and because we are still talking about them after all those decades, it makes me wonder about the significant cultural impact they had. We horror fans are always on the hunt for new or old horror content across regions and languages, because after all, this is an evergreen genre with lots and lots of amazing and evolving content always. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.